Hello, this is astrologer coach Sonja Francis, and today we're going to be talking about the upcoming full moon in 29.5 degrees of Sagittarius, which will be exact on June 20th at 7:02 a.m. East Coast time in the US, which is also New York time, or 4:02 a.m. Pacific time in the US, which is also LA time. And this is the very, very last degree before the moon moves into a new sign. And so therefore, this is a very strong exalted degree where we're really feeling that polarity between Gemini and Sagittarius very strongly for these next 2 weeks. And it's also the second full moon in Sagittarius within a single month. So this also intensifies the message of balance and integration between that Gemini Sagittarian polarity. So the last time we had 2 full moons in Sagittarius within a month was way back in May, June of 1997. So think back to June of 1997. Did you have a shift in perception around that time? Or what changed for you around that time? And what might be changing right now in terms of your thinking, in terms of your perception, in terms of what you're learning about yourself, about life, right? So just see if there's like a resonance back to 1997. And of course, any full moon is a more extroverted time, a more emotional time. And in particular, of course, when the moon is in Sagittarius and in the sun in Gemini, because those are both very extroverted signs to begin with. So we're really being invited here in these next 2 weeks to just remain very open-minded in particular, and willing to learn. And it's also about expanding our horizons, right? So the Gemini energy is about open-mindedness and willing to learn. And then the Sagittarian energy is about expanding our horizons, going beyond what we know ourselves to be. So I'm not going to go in more detail about that polarity because I already talked about it a month ago in the last full moon video when we talked about Sagittarius and Gemini. So feel free to watch that again if you like. But with this video, I really want to focus more on what else is going on with this full moon. And 2 of the things that I'd like to mention is Venus and Mercury. Venus is very close to the sun in 29 degrees of Gemini. Venus is already in Cancer, however, so it's sort of like an out of sign conjunction. And this is asking us to really align ourselves with our feeling body. And so you can ask yourself, what do we need most from our relationships right now? You know, what do we need most from our relationships? And how can we connect our thoughts with our feelings and with what we need most? So really connecting the mental and the emotional body with each other and tapping into what we need most from other people. And we can also ask ourselves, what might I hear if I consciously listened to my feeling body? Right, to my emotional body. What would I hear? And what might be possible if I experimented with communicating to others about what I need? And this might be easier for some of us than for others, right? For some of us, this might be like, yeah, that's what I'm doing all the time. For others, it might be a little bit more difficult to do that. And it might feel maybe even a little bit scary or unsafe to do that. So wherever you're at, just experiment with it as best as you can. And if you do feel a little bit scared to communicate what you really need from other people, then just take little baby steps. You know, start with just kind of like figuring out what it is that you do need, and then maybe write that down. And then once you've written it down, maybe you can share what you've written down, or you can even say it out loud. So just take little baby steps, whatever feels within the realm of comfortable, but you're stretching yourself a little bit, right? But you don't want to be stretching yourself too much so you don't feel traumatized by doing this, right? So just experiment with what feels right for you. Now, last question you can ask yourself, what if there were a way to self-nurture and communicate at the same time? And I think this is a really important question for these next 2 weeks, because when we nurture ourselves, when we really do really good self-care, that is a really great basis for being able to communicate what it is that we need or what it is that we want. So self-care and self-nurturing is really important. So what would happen if we could do both? Self-nurture and communicate at the same time, right? So just be with these questions. You don't have to answer them right away. You can just meditate with them, or you can just journal on them, whatever feels right to you. And there will be many more questions to answer. So all these questions that I do mention in my videos are always available on my website at astrologercoach.com via my weekly forecasts. And for this particular full moon, I will be posting the questions after June 19th. And you can also sign up for them to receive them via email. If you sign up before June 19th, you can email us at info@astrologercoach.com and just write weekly forecasts in the subject line, and then we'll add you to that mailing list, and then you'll be receiving these weekly forecasts every week, and that will include also the questions for the full moon and for each new moon and for each full moon, right? Now, let's go back to the full moon to talk about Mercury. Mercury, the ruler of Gemini, is in its own sign at the time of the full moon, and so that means it's also more exalted because Mercury feels very comfortable in its own sign, so it feels more confident there. Now Mercury is in a position though where it's falling exactly into that empty leg of that ongoing T-square that's been going on since March between Neptune, Saturn, and Jupiter. And so because it's falling into that empty leg, that means it's making a grand cross with all those other planets, right? And so I already talked about this a little bit also in my last video when we talked about the new moon in Gemini, right? So feel free to watch that as well again. And we're definitely being invited here to remain curious and focus on listening as well as sharing, right? Because of that Mercury in Gemini placement. But we're also being invited to kind of like take responsibility, to kind of stretch and grow beyond what we currently believe ourselves to be, what we believe to be true, how we currently connect to our inner and outer truth, you know, how we understand life, how we apply ourselves in life. And so we're really being asked to kind of like stretch ourselves and take responsibility for, you know, what's going on with us internally, you know, what's going on with our thought processes, what's going on with our beliefs that we've been carrying around for, you know, decades, some of us, right? And so questions you can definitely ask yourself are, where do we tend to make assumptions in our lives? Where do we have rigid expectations? And I just want to invite you with these questions also to just be with the question and not necessarily judge yourself, not necessarily see it as like right or wrong or that you're doing something bad. You know, we all make assumptions. We all have rigid expectations in one way or another. So it's really more about with self-compassion and with caring to just kind of notice these things and to be gentle and kind with ourselves around these things, right? And so one of the things that's really going to be helpful with that, to really be honest with ourselves around this and to be kind with ourselves around this, is you can ask yourself, what might be possible if you listened 5% more intently than you normally would to your own thoughts and to other people's words? And I think that's a really, really amazing question, because when we can do that, when we can just 5% more intently, the listening, especially to our own thoughts, but also what other people are saying to us. You know, sometimes we're only half listening to what other people are saying because we're too busy, you know, thinking about what we want to say next, or too busy thinking about other things that are going on in our lives. And so very often we miss stuff, you know, when we miss information, especially in a time like this, where there's so much energy and there's so much growing and stretching that's going on for us. We're feeling kind of stretched a little bit to the max, so we tend to miss stuff, right? That can happen, and we tend to feel overwhelmed sometimes. So in order for us to feel a little bit less stressed and less overwhelmed, and to feel a little bit less like we're missing stuff, you know, what would happen if we could just listen a little bit more carefully, right, to ourselves and to others. Now pretend for a moment that every thought matters and creates your reality, whether you believe that or not, right? And I think I've said that in another video before. Now, what kind of thoughts would you want to put out there? What kind of words would you want to speak out loud, you know? And this is just something to contemplate. You know, if really every thought and every word creates your reality, we may want to think about, you know, like how can we walk our talk? You know, when we say we want this particular outcome, or we have a particular vision about ourselves and our lives, you know, is that supported by our thinking and our speaking? And if it's not, you know, how can we walk our talk? And where are we still in the process of learning to embody our own deepest truths? Because, you know, we're always in a process. There's an internal process that goes on all the time where we're exploring, where we're learning, where we're trying to understand something about ourselves better, where we're trying to integrate something a little bit better about ourselves. So we're always in a process. So it's really important to remember, again, with this, it's not about being perfect. It's not about doing it perfectly. It's more about just learning how to see where we're at in a loving way, in a caring way, and to allow ourselves to just keep moving, keep growing, and allowing ourselves to keep learning, right? Now, Neptune in Pisces is kind of going to help us with that process a little bit, because Neptune, of course, is all about compassion. It's all about self-acceptance. And so Neptune, being part of this Grand Cross, is now retrograde. It's gone retrograde a week ago. And it's still stationing, though, at the time of the full moon, just like it did 2 weeks ago when we talked about it in the new moon video. So feel free to watch that again as well. But Neptune is really like bringing this sort of dose of, you know, the ability for us to really see what can shift and change when we're a little bit more caring and compassionate and understanding and loving and kind with ourselves and with other people, right? Now, Neptune is not the only planet that's stationing at the time of this full moon. There's Chiron and Mars, which are both stationing as well. So they're both exalted too, just like Neptune. And so we're really, all these planets are sort of in our face right now. We're really getting to feel their energy more strongly, right? And Chiron is stationing because it's getting ready for a 5 months retrograde, which begins on June 27th. And then Mars is stationing because it's getting ready to go direct on June 29th, which is 2 days later. And it's been retrograde for the past 2 months, right? So both of these planets are shifting directions. And when a planet shifts directions, they slow down and then their energy becomes more exalted and stronger, right? Now, the good news is that both of these planets are making a beautiful connection to each other at the time of their stations because they're both in a late degree of water signs, right? Pisces and Scorpio. So between now and July 27th, this really provides a wonderful support for our healing process, in particular around our masculine energies, right? So how we relate to our masculine energies, what we do with our masculine energies. And that's really all about, you know, how we do things in the world, how we pursue, how we get things, right? Because Mars is all about that going after stuff, right? And it's about, you know, like kind of like doing with passion, you know. Mars is also a very passionate energy, you know. So there's really an opportunity to heal any issues that we might have around anger, any issues that we might have around dominance, whether that's within us or within the world, any issues we might have around how we pursue things, how we take actions, and in particular, any type of pursuit or action that takes no notice of others or the planet that we live in. So something that's just kind of like disconnected from how we're connected to everything around us, right? So we're really getting a chance to actually do some healing work around that. And of course, the healing process always happens when we're able to embrace the energies as they are first, right? So we need to be able to embrace and accept where we're at. So our own imperfections, our limitations. And we need to really see that these imperfections and limitations are valid, rather than, seeing them as proof that we're broken or that we're wrong or that there's something wrong with us, right? So really allowing ourselves to see it as, this is me being me, and it's all perfect, it's all good. With self-compassion, we can get to that place. With a greater understanding of our history around wounds that we've experienced in the past. Our history in terms of our conditioning, of our family history, even our ancestors, how they have dealt with, the masculine energies, or with the with feeling energies, or being able to connect on a feeling level, right? So by embracing these things, by embracing ourselves exactly as we are, and our history, we can start to love ourselves because of our flaws, not despite of them. And that is very important. We really want to get to a place where we can love ourselves because of these flaws, not despite of them. So questions you can ask yourself with this is, what if you just decided that you are perfect with all of that, with all of the limitations, with all of the insecurities that you got, with all of the, with all of the imperfections that you perceive for yourself? What if you just decided that you're perfect because of all of that, and that you're actually exactly where you need to be? That the process that you're in right now is exactly where you need to be. What might happen if you decided that, right? And what if you released any shame around being a sensitive, fearful human being who has experienced loneliness and separation from a higher power? And the reason why I'm asking that question is because very often we have these shameful feelings around certain things where we feel we're different, where we feel we're not like everybody else, not knowing that there's a lot of people out there who are also that way, possibly. And that we all sort of experience separation to some degree. We all experience loneliness to some degree, because we're living in a human experience in a physical body that experiences duality, that experiences that separation. It's just part of being human. It's part of our reality. Now, of course, we're also divine spirit beings, and that is true too. But it's not about being one or the other. It's about the fact that we're both, and that we need to embrace that we're both, that we're humans, and that we're also spirit beings. And that it's possible for us to experience that sense of oneness and that sense of complete peacefulness. That's very possible. But we can't live there all the time, because that's not part of our human experience. And we have to also embrace the part of our human experience that feels separate, that feels lonely, that feels disconnected sometimes, right? And again, we don't have to live there all the time either, right? But we need to embrace it. That's part of the human experience. So how might you show mercy and forgiveness towards yourself for being human, for not being perfect, for having your limitations, for having flaws? So these are all really, really great questions you can sit with, you can be with, you can meditate with. And again, it's not about judgment. It's really about just allowing yourself to see where you're at, to just be honest with yourself, to allow yourself to connect with your process, to connect with what's going on with yourself, right? Now, one thing that I would like to mention here, because of the Chiron station, is that I did do a Chiron lecture several weeks ago in Chicago, and there is a recording of that lecture that exists. It's called Healing with Astrology, and some of you might have already heard me talk about this. It's really about getting a better understanding of your personal healing journey. And so I really want to encourage you, if you're on that path and if you want to understand that a little bit better for yourself, I want to encourage you to get that MP3 recording. It comes with a lot of valuable handouts, and you'll also get a chance to do some hands-on work on your own birth chart in regards to that Chiron journey. So it's a really fantastic lecture. If you are interested in purchasing it, feel free to go to my website at astrologercoach.com and just click on the link that's right at the top of my page. All right, and you can get it from there. Now, last but not least, I want to say about this full moon that it's also happening several hours before the summer solstice in the northern hemisphere. So this is also very important, very potent for us to know about, because solstices are turning points. They're energetic gateways for summer and winter seasons to come through. And so solstices points are definitely extra potent times for setting intentions and also for taking part in certain ceremonies, where you feel like you're doing something on a physical level that represents that turning point that you're experiencing with the shift of seasons, right? So the combination of this full moon with that solstice is really impactful, because that means that we're definitely going to be feeling this potent energy field for the next 2 weeks with that full moon, right? And another thing that we can do with this full moon, because it being right around the summer solstice in the northern hemisphere, is we can set some intentions. Now, normally we wouldn't be setting any intentions during a full moon. We only do that for the new moon cycles, right? But this is an exception because of that solstice. You can set solstice intentions, and you can do that anytime around 6:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Savings Time on June 20th. So that would be June 20th in the evening when the sun enters Cancer. That's when the solstice will take place. And so that's a really great time to set intentions, or to have a ceremony of some sort that you feel comfortable with, that you'd like to do. And you can also tune into the intentions that you set 2 weeks ago during the new moon, if you like. And you can just kind of like take a look at those new moon intentions from 2 weeks ago and just see what could you add to those intentions from 2 weeks ago, or what would you like to eliminate. Maybe there's something that you no longer need, that you want to just, no longer focus on. And maybe there are other things that need to be added. So just make some adjustments and see what that might be for you. And then I also have a couple of more questions for you that you can ask yourself while you're setting these intentions before, with that solstice that happens that evening. So what drains or distracts me from my long-term goals? That's something you can ask yourself. And then just, again, be with the question. You don't have to answer it right away. Just be with it and then set your intentions. And what is a single, simple, practical step I could take in order to feel more self-assured in my daily routines? And that's a really great question, because that's very much connected to that Jupiter in Virgo placement. And of course, Jupiter rules Sagittarius, rules the full moon, right? So this is a really good question to ask ourselves. What's a single, simple, practical step that I could take in order to feel more self-assured in my daily routines, right? And what would being of service look like if that expanded, if that growed, if that was growing in me, the sense of being of service? What would that look like? And what would, if being of service would be your greatest gift, what would that feel like, right? So again, these are all connected to that Jupiter energy. So really tune into that as well, as you're setting your intentions. What would being of service look like if it expanded, if it was growing? And what if being of service were my greatest gift, right? How would you interact with the world? How would you see yourself? How would you do things in life if that were true? All right, so those are the questions. If you have an ascendant, career point, or personal planets in 27 to 29 degrees of Sagittarius, Gemini, Virgo, or Pisces, or in 0 or 1 degree of Capricorn, Cancer, Aries, or Libra, then this full moon is definitely going to be more impactful for you. But even if you don't have those degrees and signs in your natal chart, I would I would invite you to take a look at your birth chart and just see where does 29 degrees of Sagittarius and Gemini fall into your birth chart. You know, what area of life, what house placement is occupied by 29 degrees of Gemini and Sagittarius. And just take a look at how you can kind of like find a balance, or how can you integrate those two areas of your life within the next 2 weeks. Right? And if you don't understand what I'm talking about here, or if you don't even have a birth chart, then definitely feel free to watch my video on how to read your birth chart. That's available for free on YouTube or on my website. And if you can't find it, you can also email us at info@astrologercoach.com and just write recording in the subject line. And then my assistant will email you a high-res recording with some handouts of that class. And you can also, it's a really great class to watch right before you join our monthly forecasting forum, which, by the way, this month, our monthly forecasting forum will be a couple of days before the full moon, not on the day of the full moon, because I'll be out of town. But you can join us on June 16th at 3 p.m. Pacific time, which is LA time, 6 p.m. Eastern time, which is New York time, or 11 p.m. London time. That's when the monthly forecasting forum, if you want to join us live, but you can also join via a recording if you like, and just receive that within 24 hours of the live event. And then that way you can still be a part of the forecasting forum, and you can also ask questions before the forecasting forum starts. So there is an online forum on my website. So if you go to astrologercoach.com and you go below the Saturn and Sagittarius video, there is a link that will take you to the monthly forecasting forum page. And if you click on that link, you will get all the information on the forum. You can read some testimonials as well. And there's also an online form at the very bottom of that page that you can fill out, and you can ask your questions, especially if you want to watch it as a recording. That's great, because I will answer everyone's question if I can. I will do my very best, but usually in the past I've been able to do that. And I, other than booking a reading with me, you know, this is really a maximum level of support that I offer, and it's really only $24 for a 90-minute webinar. So this is a really inexpensive way of connecting with me and working with me one-on-one and getting your question answered. So I really highly recommend taking advantage of that if you can. And you know, you can register now already. Again, on my website, astrologercoach.com. And please, also fill out the online form as well as make the payment, because not just to pose your questions, but also so I know whether you're going to be joining live or not for the forum. Okay, that's really helpful for me. Now, as far as setting intention goes, you know, if you do set new intentions, you know, feel free to go to my Facebook fan page and check out my notes section there. You can read about how to best set intentions. And of course, these are not new moon intentions. These are different types of intentions, but the same model applies. You know, you can set your intentions the same way that you would normally set your new moon intentions. All right. So look out for that article about how to set your new moon intentions, and then you can set your solstice intentions in that way as well. Now, again, all the questions from this video are available on my website, and you can also get them via email. If you email us to info@astrologercoach.com and just write weekly forecasts in the subject line, you'll receive those weekly forecasts once a week. We also have a new newsletter. If you don't want to receive emails once a week, those get sent out twice a month. And the newsletter just usually has my new moon and full moon videos in them. And then also I talk about special offers or announcements that I make about my business or courses that I teach. So feel free to sign up for that as well. And you can just write newsletter in the subject line when you email us at info@astrologercoach.com. And my assistant will add you to the appropriate mailing lists. All right? So have a fantastic full moon. If you have any general questions, I'm happy to answer those. If you have any personal questions, I will ask you to book a reading with me or to join me at the forecasting forum, on the monthly forecasting forum. All right? So have a good one. This is Astrologer Coach Sonja Francis. Goodbye.